Thank you, everyone, for joining. My name is Guillermo Metz. I work out of Cooperative Extension for Cornell University in New York State, in Tompkins County, and I run their large-scale solar program here that covers support for farmers and municipal officials across the state. And I'll get into a little bit of that at the very end. Joined here by Tom Murphy, who has helped us tremendously in this series, and he is formerly with Penn State Extension, now retired, and now Solar Energy Educational Advisor with Pennsylvania Association of Township Supervisors, or PSATs, in his current role. And our guest tonight is Brian Scholl, who will have a more of an introduction himself, but I'll just say briefly, he has extensive experience in the fire department, but has most recently the deputy fire marshal with the city of Phoenix in Arizona for the past 23 years. And he's joining us through the National Fire Academy. I'm sorry, through the Fire and Safety Engine. Sorry, what is the actual full name of the group? I don't have it here in front of me. My apologies.
Energy Safety Response Group, and I'll talk about that
Yes.
here as we go.
All right, the Energy Safety Response Group. Thank you. And we will get into all of that. But he also does teach at the National Fire Academy in Emmitsburg, Maryland. So apologies for stumbling through that. But we will, let me admit everyone who's waiting in the waiting room. Again, we're recording this, and this recording will be made available afterwards. So tonight's session is on first responder concerns, focusing on some of the fire concerns and things that municipalities can do to ensure that they are protected as much as possible beforehand when these large developments are going in place, and during the occupation of the actual production of power from the facility. So I'll turn it right over to Brian. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to try to at least. So it's the toughest part right there. All right, hopefully everyone can see my screen. Like Guillermo said, we're going to talk about solar PV today, kind of from the fire service AHJ kind of side of it, and we'll kind of get into more of that as we go through. I got to do my disclosures. If you put something on the internet and it's a cool picture, I will definitely try to steal it. So these are all my disclosures. I will talk about a couple of different manufacturers, keeping in mind it's just because I have experience with them. Never want to put anybody in bad light for technology or manufacturing. So don't worry about that. And like I said, I steal from the internet. So if you put something on the internet, I am gonna steal it. So I am from a company called Energy Safety Response Group. My bosses allow me to come do these type of trainings throughout the country over webinars. I just did one for ICC last month on batteries, and I'm doing one later on this month on hazardous materials. So I got to give a shout out to my owners, Paul Rogers, who's former FDNY, and Nick Warner, who's from Piqua, Ohio, for helping me out and let me do these kind of things. What is Energy Safety Response? We're just a big group of former fire service people. Everybody in our company is from the fire service for the most part. So we bring a whole lot of experience either in firefighting, hazmat. I was big in hazmat when I was with Phoenix Fire, and big into renewables. I live in Phoenix. We have about 364 and a half days of sun. So we have a whole lot of solar. If anyone comes to Phoenix and drives west towards LA, you will see a lot of solar, as well as if you go down I-10 down to Tucson. So a whole lot of solar, but our company, we kind of do it all. from the training aspect to it. That's one of the biggest things for me is going out and providing training. Um, I'm coming from a big department where training was just a norm, where some departments they don't have that kind of budget. So for me to be able to go out and do training, it's pretty impressive. And the cool thing about my company is we actually test. So if you want to know what's in solar panels, you want to know what's in batteries, we test them. So we know exactly in the smoke, what's in the runoff because we have to capture all that stuff. And the last thing is we actually do emergency response. So that's a big thing for me because some jurisdictions they just don't have the resources, so they can call, companies like us and we come out there and help you guys out. Well, we got to talk about me. That's the first thing on the agenda. And then we'll kind of get into solar. Most of the time when I'm doing a class, we always have to kind of start from the basics, make sure everybody's on the same page, the same verbiage, because that's important. Is it the solar panels that are having an issue, or is it the inverter that's having an issue? Is it the transformer that's having an issue? What is actually having the issue? And the big thing we're going to talk about is how do you manage and how do you respond to these incidents? And we'll kind of get deep into that as well as what's required. I'm going to talk about the code, but as of right now, the code is very lacking on large scale, utility scale, solar farms, solar fields, whatever you want to call them. The codes do a really good job on residential. They do a really good job on commercial solar. We're just very lacking. And I actually had a meeting earlier today with ICC, and that's something we really are going to start looking at is let's put some stuff in the code not just in NFPA 70, which is the National Electrical Code, but let's put it in the code so that's easier for all the jurisdictions as well as developers to understand exactly, hey, this is what's going on and this is what we need to do. And we'll kind of go through that and we'll go through, hey, what does the developer, what should they do? Because as an AHJ, I want those developers to understand this is what I'm looking for. And then as an AHJ, this is what we can require. And we'll kind of finish it up. My favorite part of the program is talking about me. No. A funny thing is actually I was born on Long Island, New York, and then I moved to Chicago and pretty much grew up in Chicago. So I am a Chicago Bears fan. So I do apologize for that right now. And I now live in Phoenix, Arizona. Luckily, today is a lovely spring day. It's only about 105 today, so it's not bad at all. Like Guillermo said, I just recently retired from the Phoenix Fire Department after 23 years. Um, the last portion of my career, I worked for a unit that we call the Special Hazard Unit. And basically, that was a unit that any unique challenges to our firefighters, that unit would look into that, including renewables, solar, batteries, hazardous materials, those type of things. So that's how I kind of got into it. I am very big on the NFPA and the ICCs. And this is my chance to get on my soapbox and say, we need more people from the fire service, from developers, from pretty much every industry to be part of the NFPA and the ICC because we're going to write code. And if we don't have the input from everybody that has a stake into it, the codes are not going to be as good as they need to be. We want it to be consensus, meaning that everybody comes together and then we come up with a plan and a good code. So if you have the opportunity, please try to join these. My information is at the end of the presentation. You can reach out to me and I will get you on as many as you want. I am currently on NFP 855, which is the national standard on batteries. I am also on NFPA 420. And yes, for those people that don't know NFPA 420, that is cannabis. So NFPA has a sense of humor. So we talk about cannabis grow and extraction because that's very prevalent around the country right now. I am also on NFPA 30A, which is motor fuel dispensing, but more my role in that one is more electric vehicle charging is where I'm kind of coming in, as well as the Fire Code Action Committee, which is the ICC. Lastly, I've trained all across this country. I've been to Canada, been to Mexico, and I am an instructor at the National Fire Academy. I will be there next month after it was shut down for a little bit. For those of you in the fire service, if you have not been to the National Fire Academy, I highly recommend it. Really good instructors. It's a really cool environment. You really meet people that you will stay friends with for a long time. Um, I'm actually going to California next week for a conference, and two of my former students, I'm going to meet them for dinner. So just to show you how we kind of y'all stay together. So if you do like a beer, they do have a pub on campus, which is very, very fortunate. Please ask questions. Either raise your hand. Guillermo is going to help me as the moderator. Post your questions in the chat. We're going to make sure there's plenty of time afterwards. But the more questions, no silly questions. I guarantee you, if you have a question, somebody else has the exact same question. And I don't like the term expert because that doesn't really mean anything. I just have a lot of experience. We're here in Phoenix. We have a whole lot of sun, which means we have a whole lot of solar. So I just have seen more solar than some others have, and that's the only difference. So for me, it's not an expert, it's I have just more experience. But if I don't know the answer, I'll find the answer for you and do my best that I can do there. Any questions before we go down our journey? Let's go. All right, so very basic, and I apologize for those of you that say, hey, this is really basic. We know what solar is and we know what solar PV is, but not everyone does. So let's get everybody on the same page. All we're doing is we're changing solar energy and we get it from sunlight. Like I said, out here in Phoenix, we've got a whole lot of sunlight. And we basically convert that energy and we can use it. Big thing out here right now in the Phoenix area is people are putting solar on their roofs and they're getting a residential lithium-ion battery system. All day long, when it's sunny out, they're filling up those batteries. And then when peak time for energy is about 5 o'clock for Phoenix area, they shut off their utility power and then they run their house off the batteries. So that's a really big emerging trend here in the Phoenix area. Solar hits those panels, we get those electrons kind of moving around, and then that's how we create that DC current. Solar can be just a small one. Out here, we actually do have some solar panels that just run our pool pumps. When I moved here from Chicago, if you had a pool, you were the rich person. If you live in Phoenix, I don't know what you do in the summertime if you don't have a pool. So everyone has a pool here in Phoenix, and we basically are able to run our pool heaters off a solar system. So solar is very, very prevalent. We have a lot of people that like to be off grid out in the desert areas. So a lot of different solar applications. And for the utility scale, we're either going to create that energy and we're either send it to the grid or we actually are going to send it to a battery energy storage system. A lot of the solar farms or solar fields, whatever we want to call them, are also attached to a battery energy storage system. So not only are they feeding the grid, but they're also feeding the batteries so that if we have a high demand, that those batteries can discharge that energy over 2, 4, however many hours they're set up for, so we don't get those brownouts that we've seen here in the past. Everybody likes pictures, so we got to show some pictures. As former fire service, I need pictures. So you got the big thing in the sky, hits those solar panels, and then we create that energy. Now, depending on what we're going to do with it, we either need to invert it and change from DC to AC, or we can keep it as DC and just throw it right into a battery. So that's pretty much how these work on a very, very high level. But it's either going to be residential. Like I said, we have a lot of codes on residential. If you look at the picture on the left, you see those pathways from the eaves to the ridge, separation at the ridge. That's all code required so that our firefighters can get on that roof safely and actually traverse all the way up to the ridge and then do their ventilation cuts. So like I said, we have a lot of code on residential and a lot of code on commercial. We're very lacking on the utility scale in the solar field as of right now, in my opinion. Bottom one is more of a warehouse type situation. That's been becoming very, very popular, especially out here in Phoenix, where they can try to power a lot of what they're doing in their warehouse from those solar panels. And then what we're really kind of talking about today is those solar fields or solar farms. Um, Out here, we've got a ton of them right now, just because, like I said, we have so much sunlight. For those of you that are in the market, the problem with solar panels on the roofs to me is they're kind of ugly, right? So Tesla, to their credit, came up with this really cool solar tile roof system. And here in Phoenix, when I was still working, we were going to be one of the guinea pigs for this system. And they're about 90% done with the installation. The electrician that they hired did something wrong in the attic, had an attic fire, and we burned up all of the panels. The way these work is it's really tough to tell between a real solar panel and then the dummy panels. They want to all look the same. We create a policy here in Phoenix that if this is on a roof, we will not go on top of that roof because we're not sure exactly where those panels are. But we were the guinea pig. We had a big fire and we burned all the panels, not because of the panels, but because of this electrician. For the most part, my experience in solar is we have a lot of fires involving solar in residential, either because of a fire in the house gets to the attic and to the roof, or vice versa. And we've actually had a lot in the commercial realm. I have not seen too many in just out in the solar field or solar farms, and I said we've have a lot of them. And we'll kind of get into that here in a little bit. Like I said, we're going to create DC current. We do not use DC current at home. So we got to invert that. We got to change it. We got to change from DC to AC. And that's what these inverters do. So if you're kind of looking at the diagram, you see the sun on the top left there, hits those panels, and then goes to that inverter. Now the inverter is going to change it from DC to AC, and then we can use it as a generator. We can use it in our house. We can use it on the grid, or it might keep it as DC, and then we're going to send it to the battery energy storage systems. Just different ways to kind of do different things. Residential, obviously, we need to invert that too. So you're going to have inverters on either up on the roof in microinverters, or you're going to have an inverter down on the side of your house. And the picture on the right there, that's a more commercial type inverter. So obviously a lot bigger, but they all do the same thing. We use AC, so we just need inverted and change from DC to AC. That's all we need to do. And I know we've had, I think the last class, I think Guillermo said the last class kind of got into what's in solar panels, but we just kind of want to go over it again, just to make sure everyone understands what is really in a solar panel. Because I love Google because I Google everything, but Google can be our worst enemy because when you Google something, are you 100% sure that that's true of what they're saying? So nowadays, most of the panels pretty much made of silicone. I mean, that's kind of the big one. It's got glass, obviously it's got metal, and then it's got some plastics. The fires that I've seen involving solar, it's usually that plastic that gets going, and that's where you kind of see that darker smoke come in. But that's all that's really burning off. So we'll get into tactics and strategies a little bit later on, but that's kind of what's involved. Um, as fire service folks, we all have other jobs. So if you want to know how to build a panel, you just take some sand, you melt it, you make some ingots, you cut it in little wafers, and then it kind of goes through the process. But the nice thing is that we can recycle most of what's going on in the solar panels today. I know the last class you kind of got into, and we'll kind of talk about toxicity here in a little bit. But for the most part, today's panels, I mean, they're 85, 90% recyclable, which is really, really good. Because the question that you need to ask as an AHJ or even as a developer is what happens at the end of life? What happens when I'm done with this solar farm? I'm done with the solar field. My contract's expired. It was a 25, 30-year contract, and I now need to get rid of all these panels. Where do they go, and how do I return that site back to somewhat similar to when I got there? And that's always a big question from the community is what happens when you leave? Is it going to be, this toxic farm or this toxic spill that everyone's concerned about. And that's something that we really need to be upfront and honest with people and come up with a decommissioning plan, very similar to what we do with batteries. And more kind of how we put it together. Like I said, my next slide, it's 80 to 95% recyclable, which is great. Um, I've seen some panels get damaged by hail. Obviously, there's ways to um, try to avoid that by putting them in different directions and that kind of stuff. But for the most part, you can take almost everything out of that solar panel and recycle it, which is a great thing for our community because that's the question that they're going to ask. And as the fire marshal, as the fire code official, as the fire chief, that's the question the community is going to ask you is what happens at end of life? What happens if there is a fire? What happens in 30 years from now? Where do these panels go? What happens when a panel stops working? They need to replace it. That's the questions that they're going to ask us that we need to have the answers for along with the developer. All right. So we got a solar field or we got a solar farm and we have an incident. In the fire service, we work in worst case scenario. Oh, that's never going to happen. Well, we're responding to that right now. Oh, that's never, 100 years, not going to happen. Well, that's what we live in. So obviously, we're going to be prepared just in case. Biggest thing, electrical shock. Um, and I love Home Alone, so I got to throw that in there. But I mean, if you look at the small amount of energy that's required to have a startle effect, a lock-on effect, or even put you in a cardiac arrhythmia, it's not very much compared to how much power, how much energy that these solar fields or solar farms can produce. Even just a line or a group of the panels together, how much they can produce. And some people don't like the fact that I showed nasty pictures, but if I don't show nasty pictures, people don't get what I'm talking about. This is what happens when you have electricity go through your body. It converts to heat, and that's what causes skin damage, tissue damage, and major organ damage. This is what happens when we're not paying attention. This is what happens when we do stuff that's outside our standard operating procedures, and I'll kind of talk about that here in a little bit. And this is the problem with solar. It's always on. And I'm going to say that a million times today that we currently cannot shut off solar panels. There's some things on the market, and I'll kind of get into that here in a little bit, but there's no way that we can actually put and turn off a solar panel during the day or even at night. And that's the biggest concern. So as a firefighter, as a first responder, if we start going and cutting into these things or trying to do something to them, this is what's going potentially to happen to us. Well, then you're going to say, well, but we wear all this cool equipment. Yeah, we have a lot of cool PPE, and for the most part, our gloves are very limited. They're not designed to protect us from electrical hazards. The other issue is they have very limited protection when they're dry. Well, if we're on a hose line and we're spraying water, they're not going to be dry. Same with our boots. Our boots are pretty good as far as protecting us if we're just walking in dry land or dry streets. But once again, if we spray in water, this is going to be what happens is we're going to be standing in water and then we lose all our protection. If you see the folks that work on solar panels, the folks that work on electrical lines, the folks that work on batteries, they have very specific PPE. We, as a fire service, do not have that type of PPE. So, command officers, fire marshals that are on this, how much are we going to risk, meaning our people, and putting them up to a panel? How much are we going to risk to save really nothing? As long as there's no life safety issue, there's nobody down next to the panel, why are we going to risk a lot to save very little? And that's a question that you need to ask yourself as a command officer is why should we even do anything? And that's how we get into the emergency response. All right, so the panel has a bad day. These things happen. I'm going to tell you right now, if you treat that as an electrical substation, you're going to be really good in your job because we don't drive into substations and start spraying water everywhere. For the most part across the country, our SOPs for an electrical substation is we stop at the gate and then we wait for the subject matter expert, the utility folks to show up. Now, if we see someone down, obviously we're gonna go in there and we're gonna risk a lot to get that person out. But why if it's just a solar panel on fire? We talk a lot about, we used to say, especially in the battery world, we used to say, let it burn. We're just gonna let it burn. Well, the community is like, you guys are the fire department. You guys have water in your trucks. Why are you letting things burn? So now we change it to let it consume itself, and the public's like, wow, you guys are so smart. And that's what we want to do. Let that panel just consume itself. We can always protect exposures. And we'll talk about, straight bore fog nozzles here in a second. But the idea is that there's not much we're going to do. If the plastic's on fire, yeah, we put out that plastic. But if it's an actual electrical issue going on, it's an electrified piece of equipment. Why are we going to start spraying water on it? Let it do its thing. We can protect exposures and let the subject matter experts come in and they can be the ones that can disconnect the power and start going through the decommissioning of it. Once again, protect exposures, defensive operation, wait at the gate, wait for the subject matter experts to arrive. We'll talk about emergency response plans here in a second. But if nothing else, when you go back, even if you aren't, a firefighter, you're more of a planner, you're more of a fire marshal, building code official, whatever it might be, this is what you need to impress on your friends across the hall at the fire department is there's nothing here that's worth someone's life. There's nothing. It's silicone, aluminum, that kind of things. Why are we going to risk a lot to save very, very little? And that's what we need to ask ourselves. So protecting exposure is something we can do. Because what if you walk up to this thing? What is there that's going to be affected? There's no buildings. For the most part, these solar fields are kind of out in the middle of nowhere. As you can see, if that one's burning, it kind of actually stops at the next panel. So you basically have, looks like 4 panels that are kind of involved there. Maybe you can spray water on those adjacent panels or to the panels to the back of it because it's kind of tough to see. But that's what our tactical and strategy should be. Manage the incident, defensive operations, protect exposures. That's what we need to be doing, and that's what our focus needs to be. The question that always comes up, should I, not can I, should I spray water on a solar panel? My question to you is, why? Why would you want to spray water on a solar panel? Do you have a specific job that you're trying to accomplish? Protect exposures? Okay, then that makes sense. If it's a solar panel that's out in the middle of nowhere and there's no exposures, let it just consume itself. And then we protect the unaffected panels and then we have a great day. If the plastic's on fire and you don't hear that crackling sound, yes, we can apply water. We know in the fire service that we actually can spray water on an electrified piece of equipment. 20 foot away for a straight bore, you can do 5 foot for a fog nozzle. But why? And that's my question. We're not talking about residential solar. We're not talking about commercial solar. We're not talking about, a house or someone's business. We're talking about an appliance. Out here, when I do the training, I talk about an air conditioner because we burn up a lot of air conditioners out here in Phoenix. How much are we going to risk for an air conditioner? Nothing. We're going to protect exposures, make sure that air conditioner doesn't extend to the house somewhere else. And that's pretty much what is our standard operating procedures. And we disconnect power and then we move on. So yes, we can spray water. But the other question that I always ask is why? What are you trying to accomplish by spraying water on a panel? You're not going to save that panel. That panel is now going to go to recycling, and they're going to bring in a brand new panel within a week or so, and then that panel will be back up and running again. We risk a lot to save a lot. That means people. If there's a person that we're going to save, we're going to risk a lot. That's what we do. That's our nature. But if there's nothing to save, we should not be risking anything. If we want to use water, it's just plain water. There's no pixie dust that we can sprinkle on it, and I'll kind of get into some of the stuff that I know some people have seen before. Um, Firefighters, fire service folks out there, don't use foam. Foam doesn't really help us much at all. Um, but if it's crackling like that previous video, once again, is how much electricity are you going to get back through that hose stream? So why are we spraying water if we don't need to? So if we need water, just plain water, that's enough. Why can't we just turn them off? Because they never are actually off. There's studies out there that show not only moonlight will create power, lights from our fire trucks will create power, light from a fire will actually create energy. So all of these things are ambient light, but yet we're still, so it could be middle of the night and we have a fire involving a panel. Those adjacent panels are going to be creating power because they see that light and they actually will create energy. So there's nothing we can do to turn off a panel. Nothing we can do to turn off a panel. We can disconnect the power, meaning that whatever power it's creating is not going anywhere, which is the first thing we're going to do. But there's no switch that we can push. And there's really nothing, and I'll kind of get into blankets and some of the other stuff out there in a second, but there's nothing really that we can do to turn off a solar panel. And that's the biggest thing for us in the fire service. And as far as planners go, is understanding that, okay, do we have enough separation between our panel rows? Do we have enough separation so we have little groups that, hey, if this whole group goes, I can still protect it on both sides. That's what we need to start be thinking about as opposed to trying to shut these things off. The next question, and you guys kind of went through this recently in a different class, is should I be breathing the smoke? So when I started the fire service 23 years ago, smoke was only bad when there was fire. So we would go into a residential fire, we would put out the fire, and as soon as the fire's out, what do? We take our masks off. Obviously, we've learned a lot from that, and that was dumb in hindsight. So we know all smoke is bad. But there's really nothing in the newer panels that should make us alarmed as far as toxicity goes. Now, older generation panels, that's what we need to be worried about because they have those forever chemicals. And I know that's kind of what was talked about last class. You know, the Gen X or the PFAS, and obviously PFAS is a big thing right now in the fire service. That's the older generation that are out there. I know here in Arizona that we have individuals that have a large plot of land that have a whole solar field that basically is running their operation, meaning their house, their agricultural business, and so forth. And they have very old panels. If those catch fire, you are going to get the nasty stuff. The cadmium telluride, which is a carcinogen, gallium arsenide, which is highly toxic and also carcinogen, and then phosphorus. But these are not just in panels. Cadmium telluride, semiconductors, pocket calculators, cameras, gallium arsenide, it's smartphones, Bluetooth earbuds, LEDs, and then phosphorus, obviously it's fire retardants. A lot of people keep on saying, well, a fire at one of these solar farms, oh, it's going to be so toxic and it's going to kill everything. No, the newer panels do not. I am more worried today about a residential fire because of all the fire retardants and all the plastics we have in our house these days. That's really what is the bad stuff. And that's why in the fire service, we've come a long way as far as deconning after fires because we never did that in the past, changing out our bunker gear so it's not off gassing inside the station, those kind of things, because this is what we're dealing with today. It's all the fire retardants and all the plastics. Um, I was at a meeting where someone was on Google talking about all these bad things in the older generation type solar panels. And when I was driving to the meeting, I passed by this hardware store and it looked like it had been there for 100 years. I guarantee you, if there's a fire in that hardware store, and of all the stuff that's been in that hardware store through its entire life, that is way more of a concern for me as far as toxicity and smoke than a solar field out on the outskirts of town. And we just have to get past that public opinion that they can Google things and find out, oh, it's got all these bad things. It did, not anymore. So that's how we go with it. We got to throw some fire extinguishers in there. There are certain fire extinguishers, obviously, we can use with electrified pieces of equipment. My question to you, though, is how close do you have to be to actually use one of these? Why would you be that close? What are you trying to save? Now, if you've got something you're trying to save, hey, all for it. Go do our thing. Make sure you're on full PP, you're breathing air, the whole deal. But once again, and where are you going to store these? Are these on the truck? Are they storing them for you? Where are they storing them? How are they protecting them? Are they doing maintenance? I am not a big fan of fire extinguishers for solar farms and solar fields for all those reasons. Um, you, as an AHJ, may have a different opinion saying, hey, I want fire extinguishers. If that's the route you want to go, let's figure out a way. How do we make sure that we keep these things going and have them maintained so if you actually want to use them, they actually do what they're supposed to do? This is more what I've seen in my experience in solar fields, solar farms, is really the inverter fire. Um, a little bit easier for us to deal with because once we kill power to it, then it's basically just a piece of equipment that we know how to put out. The question is, how do we isolate this inverter? And that's where the subject matter experts come in. For me, my tactics for this would be I would protect exposure until the SME comes in. They disconnect the power, and then they tell me, "Yep, we're good to go," and then we will start spraying water on it. Would be my tactics if that's something we can do. They get there in time, those kind of things. That's what I would do. This question comes up all the time. Well, we're out in the middle of Colorado, we're out in the middle of wherever, and we have brush fires. The nice thing about solar farms, solar fields is normally they've got a really good perimeter, defensible space for us. And that's something that I would require as an AHJ is making sure you have that defendable space between either a fire inside the fence or a fire outside the fence coming to your solar field or solar farm. This is definitely one of the things that I would start looking at as an AHJ. Do I have those defensible spaces? Because this is a real world scenario. Now, if you look at the picture, I've got a big road and then I've got smaller roads going to the left there, and then I have some space within the actual solar field itself. So, am I comfortable with this? And that's kind of the stuff that you would have a conversation with your ops folks saying, hey, this is the layout. What do you think? Or you want to add another apparatus access road or another buffer or whatever you might be. I will talk about vegetation management because that's probably the most important thing, in my opinion, for this type of installation. If I have any ladder or truck guys on the webinar, I'm sorry, but there is no overhaul. You got to keep your saws and keep your axes and keep everything else in the truck. There's no reason for us to start pulling these things apart. You can start getting into them with a saw and you're going to potentially electrocute yourself or somebody else that's on or near those panels. Tarps. I've had a lot of people say, well, we'll just throw a big old tarp over it. In a solar farm, solar field, that's a little bit more practical. But if it was just on fire, how hot is that? And now are we putting something combustible on top of something that's very, very hot? and now we're actually creating a new fire. If you are using the tarp, make sure it's that very thick black plastic tarp, because that's the only that's out there that actually will keep the sun from hitting it. Um, Fire blanket, same thing. My opinion, you're getting really, really close to panels that you don't need to be that close to. Once the incident is relatively over and fire's out, subject matter experts are on scene, and you're kind of trying to close out the call and you want to throw a fire blanket over the top, I think that's appropriate as long as everyone's in proper PPE. Once again, breathing air just in case something were to happen. And I'm not saying that these products that are in these pictures don't do what they're supposed to do. I think I've actually seen a lot of good feedback from these, but how close, again, if that is a solar field instead of a rooftop there on the top right, how close do I need to get to try to either spray the adjacent ones, or am I going to put out the fire and then spray it on? A lot of questions that I have for these types of things. The other question I have is, have you ever used it before? Have you ever trained on it? Do you know the limitations? Do you know the adverse effects that could come up? That's the questions that I would ask if someone said, "Hey, I want to use these." Cool. If you want to use them, make sure you're trained on them. Make sure you understand exactly the good and the bad, because that's what we need to know. Um, this gentleman right here that's in the middle, spraying a panel, yes. The panel is not on fire and there's no issues with it. You 100% can spray it down, not a problem. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a panel that's had a bad day, and why are we spraying this stuff on there to kind of stop it? More residential applications, commercial applications, but it's out there. And if something's out there, I guarantee you someone's going to try to use it. So blankets, tarps, and these types of sprays, train on it if you want to use it. Make sure you understand the limitations of them. And then always make sure you have some sort of backup. So if something does go wrong, that you're protected, just like we would for a lot of other things. Obviously, the big thing in the fire service right now is, how do we close out that call? How do we get to go home at the end of the day and say, okay, we're done. We've done everything that we're supposed to do. How do we get out of this and not do fire watch and not sit there for 4, 8, 10, 12 hours? That's the subject matter expert. Um, we talked a lot about solar in the code world, and I guarantee you that everything that we're doing with lithium ion batteries and battery energy storage systems is going to bleed over into solar, meaning that at some point we're going to require a decommissioning plan, which means here is the plan on how I'm going to get rid of these damaged panels. This is who we're going to call. This is what we're going to do, because that's important. If I was the incident commander, is if I turn this over to you, how do I know that you know what you're doing? And then when I go home or back to the station, that I don't have to come back out of here again because now we have an issue. And if I leave not 100% knowing, how much risk and liability do I put on myself, my department, my city, my county, my state, whatever it might be? So that's a good question that I would ask in your pre-construction meetings, your plan review meetings, meetings with developers, is, do you have a plan for removing damaged panels? And what is that plan? And can I see that plan? Can that plan be part of the plan review process? Because I think it really, really should. Obviously, there's other things, not just with the solar panels. We may have a substation or switchyard nearby. We're going to have transformers nearby. We might have energy storage systems. We might have combustible liquids. We might have propane that's on site. There's just a lot of other things that come into play when we start talking about these solar fields and solar farms that we need to be aware of, and therefore transfer that information to our first responders so they are also aware of it. The worst thing as fire prevention, fire marshal, building official, or planners, that we get these plans that have a lot of really good information and we don't give that information to other people. That's what we need to do. Give it to everybody. Hey, did you know there's 3 propane tanks on the site? No, we didn't know that. That's something that'd be important for me because now that's an exposure. I might need to protect that exposure. So, and there might be some OEM buildings where now we're going to switch tactics. Now it's a building. Okay, we know how to deal with buildings and we do our normal stuff. But going to the site saying, hey, we have a fire at the solar field, first thing I'm thinking is solar panels, but now we also got to worry about everything else that could be there. And this gets into training, training, and more training. I tell a lot of developers that if you are not available, either in person or by phone, we, being the fire service, we're going to make a decision. That's what we do. We show up to a scene, we assess what's going on, and we make tactical decisions. That's what we do on a daily basis, no matter if it's a car accident or it's a fire or it's medical. That's what we do. So if I can't get a hold of somebody, if I can't talk to somebody in person, what decisions am I going to make with very little information? And that's my biggest concern. So if you are a developer or you're an AHJ, that's something that you got to require is having that 24-hour contact number. Even if it goes to some monitoring company that starts calling other people, how do I get hold of somebody that knows what's going on with these systems? Most times that I've seen, there's always someone in the area that is that person, but do you have their phone number? Where do you find that phone number? What happens when they go on vacation? Because bad stuff happens on Sunday at 2 a.m. when everyone's on vacation. Who do we call that? I highly recommend to all my developers, all my owner operators to take even the littlest 100, 200 level ICE incident command system training so they understand what we do when we come on scene. Understand what we're saying and what we're doing and how we take command and how we create this command structure. Because the more they know and the easier it is to fit them into our command structure. Now your logistics or now your research, whatever you might want to put them in. Remediation obviously is the biggest thing for the owner operators. You know, how do you get rid of these things when there's a problem? And then at the end of life, at the end of the project, how do we put that dirt back to what it was before? And training, training, training. Um, these are a once, maybe in a lifetime, twice in a lifetime type event for me, but it could be a bigger event. So let's make sure we're out there getting our training, getting our eyes out there, understanding where the gates are. And I'll kind of get an access here in a little bit is where are the gates at? How do I know where I'm getting dispatched? And that's something that as an AHJ or a fire marshal, that's your role in saying, okay, how are we going to label these gates correctly to make sure we know where we're going? This is something, once again, that kind of came out of batteries, but it's in chapter 4 of the International Fire Code as far as planning and training. I believe that every single solar field, solar farm should have an emergency response plan. And the emergency response plan is designed for the first responders and it's based on their SOPs, you know, so we want to make sure that ERP fits how they do things. And we need to train on that ERP. And if it's not working, it's a living document, we can change it. But that ERP needs to be on site. So when we show up and you have a brand new captain that just wasn't able to go to all the trainings because we have so much training and he's first on scene, he's command, where's that ERP so he can actually look at that ERP and start going through the process of saying, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. I need to do this. I need to do this. I need to call Guillermo because he's a subject matter expert. Who do I call it and start getting, you know, understanding here's my research. So having that physical copy somewhere near the main entrance to me is huge, but just requiring that as an AHJ, there is a path to require it and it's through chapter 4. In addition, you guys should be requiring training. And Guillermo had a great question for me the other day when he's like, "Well, how do you know if it's good training?" That's always a tough question. Obviously, when ESRG comes in and we do the training, we have that fire service experience. I can say, "Hey, I got 23 years," or my colleague Eric Wood has got 20 years in Ohio, or Chief Danny Murray from FDNY, he's got 30 some odd years. So we have that experience, but that's on you. When we wrote the codes about training, we left it very vague. So the fire department, the HJ, the first responder, emergency managers, they can dictate what they want in training. Do they want a site visit every time? Perfect. Let's walk the site every time. Do you want to do classroom every time? Let's do that. Maybe this year we're just going to do tabletop exercises. Or maybe we do a full-blown drill. Let's act like there's a fire. Let's do a full-blown drill and go through everything that we have in the emergency response plan and in our SOPs. Um, Having the subject matter experts there. For me, giving training just to us in the fire service and not including the building official, the planners, as well as the developers, owner operators, is kind of it's not the best strategy for me because we all need to work together. If there's an incident, even the building code official, there might be some structural issues. There might be some other issues that electrical issues. Now they're coming in because they're part of the electrical inspection team. So having everybody together, having everybody trained, the first time that you see that subject matter expert should not be Sunday morning at 2 a.m. when there's an incident. Have that relationship, and I'll start kind of talk about here that in the next section, is we need to build those relationships. That's to me the biggest key, because if I've met Guillermo and he's my subject matter expert and I've met him 5 times and I have a relationship with him, I know what he looks like. That's kind of the big key. I trust him because I've talked to him before, and he shows up on scene. I'm feeling good now, as opposed to someone I've never met before. Who are you? And that'd be the questions I have. I would, if I was the HJ, training prior to commissioning and then annual training through the life of the project. And you dictate what you want. If whatever training you want, that should be on you. We made it a little vague so we didn't get any fire departments in trouble by not doing certain type of training, like, hey, you have to do a drill every time. We didn't say that. It's upon you guys to say, hey, this is what we want. Hey, we just got a bunch of, we got 10 new firefighters that came in. Let's go do the whole thing. Let's do the classroom, the walkthrough, and then maybe do a drill. It's upon you guys to tell the owner operator, this is what we want this year. But having that relationship, talking about it ahead of time, saying, so they can prepare for it. Because obviously it is a little bit of money, but having that conversation ahead of time is key. So I'm an AHJ and I'm getting this facility in my jurisdiction. First thing, it's access. How do we get there? What's the address? And what are the gates called? Just because, Bob's solar company wants to call it gate one, maybe you don't want to call it gate one. Maybe you kind of want to call it West Gate, Broadway Road Gate. What do you want? Because it's important. They know how to get to their site. They've been there a million times. We're coming code 3, potentially at night. How do we get to the gate? How do we find the right location so we're not a mile away? These sites can be 2, 3, 4, 5,000 acres. How do you know you're going to the right location? And that's important. That's also why a site walkthrough is critical, so you understand these are the gates. This is where we go. If someone calls 911, they're going to say gate 1, or they're going to say West Gate, or whatever they're going to say, and that's part of the planning and training you're going to do with the on-site folks. So address, where do you want them to go? And then do you want to do knocks? Do you want to do knocks, or are you good with just cutting a lock or cutting the chain a little bit? That's up to you. That is our job to figure out, what do we want? If we're big on knocks and we like Knox padlocks, let's do Knox padlocks. If we want to do a Knox box, let's do a Knox box with a key in it. This is totally up to you. Preemption devices, meaning that, we have a strobe pattern in our trucks that open the gate automatically. That might be a little bit overkill, but how do we know how to get there? And I would consider every single road inside of that facility to be a fire apparatus access road. So let's make it a fire apparatus access road per the fire code. Fire code has very good stuff. If you need more stuff, we beefed up our stuff in the Phoenix fire code. All you gotta do is go to phoenix.gov and you can steal our fire code. In the fire service, if you're reinventing the wheel every time, you're doing it wrong. If someone has something that works, you should steal it. And hopefully everyone steals a lot of the good stuff we put in the Phoenix Fire Code, because I know that I stole a lot of stuff from different fire departments, FDNY, LA County, Denver, especially with cannabis. So if you don't have a good apparatus access road ordinance, definitely look at ours. Just because there's a gate doesn't mean we need to go in. Just because there's a gate, we don't have to go inside. The SOP, the emergency response plan, should say we're going to stage at that gate and we're going to wait for the subject matter experts to show up unless there's a life to save or lives to save. Okay. Obviously, things change. If all of a sudden we get a prevailing wind and it's pushing that fire down a row of panels, okay, maybe we need to do something. Maybe we need to start protecting exposure, start spraying water like we know how to do. But our first job and our first tactic and strategies and our first thought should be we're going to stage here, gather as much information, and wait for the smart people to show up that can help us and create an actual plan that's going to do some good for us. I would definitely recommend signage if you're doing knocks to make sure that our guys know that they have a key, and then making sure that everything's locked up tight. But it's not just signage, it's signage on the gate, making sure that people understand, don't go in here, whatever it might be, high voltage. That's all required. That comes out of the National Electrical Code. You can require all the signage that you want. I would definitely always have a main sign that says the main address and the emergency contact information. And it's not necessarily just for us as the fire service. It's for the police officer that comes by and someone broke the gate or someone had an accident, drew through the gate or whatever it might be, and there's someone they can call. It's also beneficial for the public because now they actually have a phone number. If they get mad or something about this solar situation, there's someone to call as opposed to nobody. So I definitely would require that. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Uh, lost my voice. All right. So the next thing is, excuse me, vegetation control. What is vegetation control? We got to make sure that there's no grass that's high enough that's going to create a hazard for us. And there's different ways you can do it. Having native species plants, like here in Arizona, we're going to have native species plants if we actually have any planting. Out here in Arizona, we don't have a lot of plants under our solar panels. We have weeds, we have tumbleweeds, but we actually don't have any plants. This is probably the most important thing for AHJs to ask is, what is your vegetation control or vegetation management plan? What are you going to do? In other parts of the country, not here in Phoenix, where it's green, then you're going to have a different plan than I'm going to have out here in Phoenix. Is it just we're going to mow? Are we going to just try to kill everything before it gets too high? What are we going to do? And that's important because that's the exposure. If I have a solar panel that's having a bad day, it's on fire, and there's no exposure underneath, I'm pretty confident that it's not going to go anywhere. If I have vegetation that goes as high as those solar panels, that is now my exposure, and that's now what's going to make this a bigger incident than it needs to be. Vegetation control or vegetation management is the most, in my opinion, the most important thing. Now, as I started learning more and more about solar in my life, I realized that you can actually use sheep and goats. Um, I tell a lot of firefighters if you want a second career, get some sheep or get some goats because not only can you take care of a solar field, but you can also do goat or sheep yoga, which is a thing, I guess, where they just walk on your back. But then I was told that you do not want goats because goats will actually jump on the panels and they will eat through the wiring, which is good to know. So having sheep come through to me is kind of a win-win. You're still using the land for livestock, you're still using it for grazing, but now it's dual purpose. Those sheep are doing their job, they're eating all the grass, keeping the exposures down, but yeah, you're still being a good neighbor as a solar people, saying, yes, we're still using this land for grazing or whatever it might be. So, what is the plan? What is the vegetation control management plan that they're going to come up with? I would require that as part of the plan submittal. In addition, if I was the HJ, I would check up and say, okay, is this plan still working? Or no, we've got torrential rains this summer, so our vegetation management isn't keeping up. All right, let's change the plan because that's the exposure. If you have weeds as high as that one on the right side, and you have that panel that's on fire, that weed is going to catch fire, and now you have a grass fire. And that makes this incident so much bigger than, like I said, than it needs to be. So vegetation control is probably the number one thing that I would always make sure we're good to go on. This was also a new thing for me. So this is not necessarily code required. So this is more when I talk to the developers. The public likes wildlife. People that live out, they like to see the wildlife, that they like to see, the animals go by. So how do we make solar and wildlife be able to live together? And it's incorporating these corridors that allows, the bigger animals to be able to go through in a safe manner, and then having different type of fencing that allows the small animals just to go through and do whatever they need to do. They're not going to bother the panels, but it's better, it's more friendly to the wildlife, and that is also a big thing with the public. So when I talk to my developers, this is one of the things that I talk to them all the time about is how are you guys going to take care of the wildlife because that's very, very important to people. Is it this chain link fence? So if you look on the left side, kind of in the grass there, not a good vegetation management program going on right there. But you've got a little bitty rabbit that's able to go through that fence. The bigger animals cannot, but the little ones can, and they won't bother the panels. But yeah, you're still being a good neighbor. The picture on the right, very similar thing, where you've got a little fox or mink in there that's kind of going through. This is more developer and being a good partner, a good community member than it is code, but you're going to get yelled at as the fire marshal if the people are worried about the wildlife. So having that conversation with the developer, I think is very important is how are you going to overcome this? Because this is going to come up every single time. When I talk to developers, first thing I tell them, call the fire department. Call them, but we're 4 years away from even starting construction. Call the local fire department, tell them you have a proposed installation, what it's going to be. Here's my phone number. And hey, let's even have a little meeting. And because what that does for us in the fire service, it allows us to start thinking, start planning. What am I going to do in 4 years from now? I might be retired. So what is the next person going to do? Let's start having that conversation as early as possible and start building that trust. That's also important. Developers, open houses, public engagements, they want answers. And if the developer is not there to give them answers, they will find their own answers on Google. I guarantee it. So developers, be open, be transparent, be there to answer the hard questions. Is it the real news or is it the fake news? And that's where you have to kind of, help out. I talk a lot about batteries because that's a big deal right now, but we separate your electric vehicles, micromobilities from utility scale because it's night and day. And that's kind of what we want to do is make sure, is what they Googled the actual truth? And that's what the developers need to do is get there, be part of the community, open up an office, let people come in, let people ask those hard questions. That's what they need to do as developers, as opposed to, oh, I had to do a public open house because it's required by the zoning and we're 6 months away from getting our permit. You will lose all public opinion if that's what developers do. If they come in the last minute, and I've been in many meetings where they come in the last minute, they almost lose every single time. HJs, we want plans. We want plans submitted both the building code folks because they're going to be looking at the structure. How are these panels going to be erected? What are they going to be sitting on? Do they follow the train or do we have to actually take down all the hills? Hopefully they go with the ones that follow the train. Much better at end of life. So building electrical, bringing in NFPA 70 involved, but fire marshals, fire code officials, you're there for access and signage. How do we get our firefighters there? How do we keep them safe with the signage? And do they know where they're going? And helping them, you're going to be the ones that are going to be the ones that require that training. Hey, you need to do training this year. All right, here it is. We're going to do it on this day. So you're going to be working with your building code officials together as you kind of go through. Not much in the codes and standards on solar farms. Um, you're going to rely heavily on your electrical inspectors. There's nothing wrong with reaching out to subject matter experts like Guillermo here or Tom Murphy here that's on there. Those are the people that we can reach out to give us an honest answer. The code allows us, if we are not comfortable or we're not an expert in a certain type of system or a certain type of plan review, the code says, hey, we can require a third party to come in and help us in the process, do plan review, do inspections, do all of it. And the money is paid by the customer, not the jurisdiction, not the county, not the city. Comes out of Chapter 1 of both the IFC as well as NFPA 1. Third party, meaning it's not their engineering firm that's already working on the project. It's separate third party. Then that third party works for you and they do whatever you want them to do. Be it, plan review, be it inspections, whatever you need them to do. Don't be afraid to use them. The city of Phoenix, our building side is 100 strong, if not more. The fire marshal's office is 40 inspectors, 5 deputies, 2 assistants, 5 fire protection engineers, and we use third party all the time. Because at the end of the day, how much risk and liability are you going to take home because you approve something that you really didn't know what you're approving? And that's always the question. How much risk and liability are you going to bring on yourself, your city, your department, your county, your state, whoever it might be, and why? If the code gives us an avenue to bring in someone that's an expert, bring them in, let them be the ones. They stamp the plans, they stamp the inspection, they takes that risk and liability off of you, and they're also more of an expert, so we know that this is getting done correctly. So never, never, never be afraid to use third party. If you need it, the code allows it. And just to kind of finish up, obviously, if we install it correctly, if we do good plan review, they install it correctly, it's going to work well. NFPA 70 is going to be the most important one for most of these. Training, training, training. Even if it's going to be your 5th time going to that solar farm, I guarantee there's something else that you're going to see go, I didn't see it last time. So I know now, well, I didn't know there's this really low area that at nighttime, that's now a trip and fall hazard for my folks. So training going out there, doing tactical worksheets, that's what we should be doing as well as the emergency response plan. Either a developer, HJ, I don't care. We need to create partnerships because we need more power. Everything we do now is based on power. Everything I'm using right now is based on power. All these large new industries are using a whole lot of power. We need more power. And that's what solar does for us. So let's be a good partner and work with developers, bring in these indoor communities where they're appropriate and create those partnerships. And that's how we'll actually make things go better. Be open. If you're an HJ, be open to the public. Hey, we've met with these people 5 times. They're going to be code compliant. We're going to do planning. We're going to do training on this because that's what the public wants to hear. If the public thinks that the fire department is okay with the project, they're more likely to be okay with the project as well. So if you go and you meet with the developer, you do proper plan review and everything looks good and they do a good product, of course, we should be praising that, saying, yes, they did a great job. Lastly, like everything else, I can build the best system, but if I don't maintain it, it's not going to work for us. So we got to make sure that everything's getting maintained. They should have a maintenance plan. How often do they do certain things and make sure they're abiding by that? It's their plan, part of the plan review submittal, make sure it's there. Training needs to be ongoing. We get new people all the time. We get people moving around our jurisdictions, different areas, ongoing training. And that includes your mutual aid partners, your automatic aid partners, everyone that could potentially come to this, police officers, fish and game officers, whoever it might be that might come here because the call kicks out, make sure they're part of that training so they understand what we're going to do, what they should be doing. Keep having that dialogue. Every time you do training, go talk to whoever the subject matter expert is. Get to know that person. Make sure you have that good partnership. And the last one is really more for the developers, but becoming a member of the community. When I talk to my developers and owner operators and they want to do training, I tell them, let's not just do, utility scale training. Let's do residential solar training. Let's do commercial solar training because that's more likely what they're going to see than coming out to your site. So let's give them really good training. And that shows that, hey, I want to be a member of this community. I want to help out. And I think that's really important for a developer to not just be coming in there, be the corporate, whatever, come in, be a member of the community. And it's really much more beneficial on both parts. Ooh, how'd I do? Oh, that's not bad. Questions? And like I said, I'm from Long Island and Chicago, so I can talk forever.
That was great. Thank you, Brian. We've got a couple of questions in the chat that I'm going to get to this last one first because it's kind of pertinent to what you were just talking about. So it's when would you advise is the best time to start the planning and most importantly, the training for first responders during the solar permitting process at the municipal level?
So training, I would definitely start having meetings with the developers as an AHJ, meet with them, kind of get their site plans going, and then I can bring that back to the station. I can start doing my tactical worksheets. I can start, hey, if something were to happen here in the future, and then once you start building it more up, that's when you're actually going to start bringing the firefighters or the first responders or whoever might be out there. So for me, it's never too early. Never too early to have a discussion saying, hey, this might come in. Because if someone is putting that in your jurisdiction, there's a reason. It's because your utility company needs that energy. And it might not be just that project, it might be a different project across the county. So it's going to happen. So I say the earlier the better. And training, on-site training just prior to commissioning, that's usually pretty good. And then annual training after that through the life of the project.
Great, thank you. Bouncing back to an earlier topic, can a burned panel be recycled?
The components of it can be recycled is what I'm told. So depending on what burned from it, um, you're not going to get as much, but yes, damaged panels can still be recycled from what I was told from a local recycling facility here in the Phoenix area.
Great. Yeah, and as you mentioned, the last presentation we had last week did cover a lot of the recycling industry, what can be recycled, how it's recycled, as well as sort of toxicity of panels and things like that, which is really they're not nearly as toxic as some people make them out to be. There's not a whole lot there, as you mentioned.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the nice thing,
yeah.
and I appreciate industries changing things, changing how they do things to make it safer for us as first responders as well as community. So back in the day when they first came out, they were bad. And if they caught fire, they were bad for us. We've come a long way. So
Yeah. Yeah, the cadmium telluride ones tend to be the thin film panels,
yep.
and New York State, at least, on the large scale solar developments, we've never had cadmium telluride panels. None of those projects have ever happened. So, as long as we're talking about solar farms, that's not going to be a concern. Um, Advice on how to design roadways through a solar facility to allow for first responder access.
Yeah, so like I said, I would go and steal everything out of my fire code that I helped write in the Phoenix Fire Code because we have a lot of good things about alternate service fire lanes. Because um, we want to make sure that when we drive a truck on those lanes, if we need to, battalion rig, brush truck, whatever it might be, that it can withstand and hold us up so we don't actually, bog down. So I say that any road that's inside the fence that is used for vehicles should be a fire department apparatus access road and should be done per code, which means compaction, potentially curbing, reflectors, so we know where we're driving as we go through it at nighttime. I would use the entire code on all those because, and the benefit to the developer, owner, operator is you can now bring whatever truck you want on site because I guarantee it's gonna be less weight than what we bring on.
Yeah, and I would just hazard or caution that there are some rules around road sizes and things per jurisdiction. So
Yep.
there's some of that. Also, we've heard some issues with municipalities wanting permeable roadways for a lot of good reasons, but
Yep.
those are then going to be a lot more difficult to maintain, and also in some cases, that heavy equipment has trouble driving on them. So
Right.
you have to kind of balance
And
those things.
And like we talked about, that's also part of those early meetings. Hey, we want this. Well, the community wants this, or your environmental folks want this. So if we can start early enough in the planning phase, then by the time we get to when they're ready and they're in a hurry all of a sudden, we've already gone through all this stuff. So early engagement, that's why I talk to developers and owner operators. Early engagement, the better because we can start getting a lot of this stuff taken care of. That's a great question. Yeah, hey, we really want these roads to be permeable. Okay, how do we accomplish that and still make it so that our trucks can go on there safely? And the earlier you do that, the better you can do it.
That's great. And we have a related question. I don't know if we need clarity on this one, but what alternative materials are okay for fire access roadways? So, Amy, I'll
Yeah,
invite you
there,
to
yeah,
unmute
there's a
if you
lot of
have some.
stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there. The biggest thing is can it handle the trucks? And do you get a compaction report? Our thing out here in Phoenix was always, pretty much we basically spelled it out in our fire code. You do these layers, you compact them down to 90%, and then we're good to go. And you get a compaction report. That's where you're also going to bring in your structural guys. You might be bringing in your roadway guys. They might be coming in to help you say, hey, this is how we should do this type of stuff. But there's a lot of stuff in the codes that say this is how you build an alternate surface fire apparatus access road, and I would definitely use that.
Brian, this is Amy. I asked the question. One of your slides mentioned alternates for roadways. I'm wondering, what if they just had a designated area that they kept as low mode grass or like a permeable gravel mixture? As long as it can meet compaction rates, that's okay. Once you start
Yeah.
the line of communication.
Once again, yeah, you're going to start that early. Normally, everything that I've seen, it's always been they actually have to design it. So they're going to get a structural, engineering firm in, and they're going to build it per the fire code. Um, I have seen somewhere, hey, we've been driving semis over this forever. It's hard as concrete. I agree. But what happens when we have a hard rain and then one of our fire trucks tips over or whatever happens? So I always look back to the fire code because then I have something that can protect me, protect my city, protect my state, protect my firefighters because we did it per the code. Going outside the code, that's where I'd be worried about. So look in chapter 3, I want to say, for alternate service access roads and go that route.
Thank you. I think that did sound like it answered it. Any thoughts on danger, high voltage, or other signage on the exterior of the fence,
Yep.
and how close to each other, how many of them around a solar site? I'll just chime in real quickly that there are, in New York State, there's guidance on, you were saying at the entryway, there's required signage, there's required information to be able to contact somebody at the developer. But to this point, how many, it's kind of like how many signs, how regular?
It's tough. I mean, even in the National Electrical Code, NPA 70, it's not clear. It doesn't say, hey, we need one every 20 feet, every 25 feet. Um, for me, I've always used is it visible and is it legible? So if I stand outside the fence area, can I see a sign one way or the other? That's what I would go with. Until we come up with some good strategies like we do, with addressing, where we say, hey, this is the stroke, this is the size. It's got to be on a reflective background or like FTC science and that kind of stuff. Until we come up with that, it's going to be your best judgment of saying, how big can I still see it? Can I see it from the roadway? It's kind of tough right now, but it's going to be your best judgment.
Mhm. And Tom responded, there's no code requirement now for signage.
Yep.
Getting back to some of the fire issues, you did kind of mention, we talked a lot about panel fires, and that's what we really focused on. And you also mentioned at one point, in sort of in passing, that these are not common. So we wanted to address the concern about fires. That's your main, probably first responder concern. So I wanted to ask you kind of like how concerned should people be, I guess, of panel fires on these solar farms first? And then I have a follow-up.
Yeah, it's tough because when you're putting in, how many thousands of solar panels, how many thousands of miles of wiring and connections and that kind of stuff, the chances are greater to have an incident. It's a very low probability incident, but it can become a large incident if there is a problem. Um, I didn't really even touch on kind of medical calls. That's another thing that, we don't really talk much about is, but what if you have one of the workers down and they're having a medical issue? How do we know how to get there? That's all part of that planning and training that we need to do ahead of time so we can understand, hey, he's by gate 5. Okay, I know where gate 5 is. It's on my map. It's in the computer on the truck. So there's a lot of things, but I think it's a very low probability event, but we still need to plan and train as much as we can on these.
Yeah. And anything municipalities can do upfront, training for sure, signage and things like that, and just understanding kind of who the people are that need to be contacted and how to get on the site. But like you said, medical emergencies, even, it's rare, fortunately, but, kids going on the site, sort of trespassing onto a site. They're not supposed to be on there. There's fences, there's everything, but people sometimes get into these sites and can get injured. So first responder concerns and how to address some of those at the sort of regulatory level or training level.
It's tough because there's not much in the regulatory side of it, but let's say that I am a jurisdiction that we are 100 miles from a hospital. Maybe I need a landing zone for the helicopter. So maybe we put that in our plan saying, look, this area over here, we're going to keep low vegetation, not a lot of rocks, and that's going to be our landing zone because we know we're going to have to helo anybody out of here if they have a heart attack or a major medical incident. Once again, we need to come together with developers and we start talking about these things. Have those pre-construction meetings way, way ahead of time. It gives us time as ASJs to start going through all the stuff that we're worried about, but also gives the developer time to actually come up with plans on how they're going to overcome all our questions. So having that early engagement is probably the most important thing to overcome everything that we can think of. Somebody, shooting it. I've heard that one before. Yeah, someone can definitely shoot. I've seen bunches of signs being shot. I've had that question with Signage on the fence. Well, if I put a sign on the fence, someone's going to shoot it. I, I can't help you with that. There's no code that say you can't shoot a sign or something like that. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of things that are out there, but the more planning, the more training, the more communication we have between the developers, owner operators, first responders, AHJs, that makes all that stuff easier to handle and easier to overcome if it comes up.
Yeah, excellent. I think you had your contact information maybe at the next slide. If you want to
I
flash
got
that up.
so if anyone that knows me, I like memes. So obviously I got to throw some memes in there because that's what we do. I'm from the fire service. My fire service classes have way more memes and everyone makes fun of me, but I'll give everybody a second and then the next slide will be my contact.
And we're running up to the hour. So if other folks want to throw in any questions, there's Brian's contact information, and this has been recorded. I apologize profusely for flubbing the introduction so badly. It's been a long day already. But these are recorded and they will be posted once we resolve the technical issues, and everyone who's registered, so all of you will get an email as soon as those are posted with that link. Also, let me, if you can stop sharing for a second, I'm going to flash up some other contact information that, if I can find it, here we go. This is my contact information as well as a couple of folks. So you probably are familiar with the Clean Energy Communities program, which I don't know why that's okay. There we go. Clean Energy Communities program is a NYSERDA program here in New York State that provides assistance to municipalities for basically clean energy measures at a municipal level. They now have hired over the last few months, 6 months or so, a couple of clean energy advisors specific to solar. So these folks, Mike Dunn and Eva Hoskin, covered the entire state, with Mike covering sort of western territory of the state, if you're familiar with the division, and Eva being the eastern side of the state. So if you've got any questions on regs or policy concerning large-scale solar, these are good resources to reach out to. I am also available. I work statewide, as I mentioned, helping municipalities and also farmers and landowners sort of navigate the whole process. And also, we didn't get into it and wasn't really part of this conversation, but agrivoltaics. So combining co-siting solar and ag on the same site. Happy to help any municipality sort of just with information about what's possible, other resources out there, that kind of thing. We did have 2 sessions already. We alluded to, or we mentioned the last one a little bit with environmental concerns, which did touch on panels and balance of systems, and also the other environmental concerns like soil compaction and things like that. The first one, the week before that, on the 9th of July, covered sort of community engagement with talking about the municipality, the community, and the developer, and how to get those 3 working together as effectively as possible. And so if you've registered for this one or any of them, you will get the link to all of the recordings. And next week, same time, 5:30 on Wednesday, is our last one in the series with pilots and actually more focused on host community benefit agreements. So we'll tackle it from that angle. Again, mainly focused on providing information for you all as municipal officials and planners. Again, if you ever have any questions, reach out to me. I can put you in touch with the right people. And we're right up against 7 o'clock. Any last burning question, or we will wrap it up for the evening? Ryan, thank you very much again.
Thank you for
Tom,
the
thank you
invite.
for your behind the scenes work. And thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thanks, guys. Good job.
hopefully we'll see you next week. And again, thank you, Brian. Good night, all.